"You're just a babysitter," my husband sneered at me, his lips curling into that smug little smirk he wore whenever he thought he'd won something. His words stung, sharp as glass, but I didn't let my face show it. I stood there in the kitchen, dish towel in hand, the sound of the dishwasher humming low in the background, and I forced myself to breathe slowly. A babysitter. That's what he thought of me. Not his wife, not the mother of our child, not the woman who worked night shifts, took care of the bills, and made sure the mortgage didn't swallow us whole. No, just a babysitter in his perfect little world. And yet, that very afternoon, his mother would look me in the eye, slip a manila folder into my trembling hands, and whisper, "He has no idea. This is yours now." Inside? The trust account. His father's legacy. A truth that would turn his sneer into silence. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Don't forget to subscribe before I tell you how it all unfolded. Because trust me, you won't want to miss a story like this. It started months before that insult. Life felt almost normal then. We lived in a 2-story home just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. Beige siding, a tired little porch swing that creaked when the wind hit it right, and a yard full of toys our 4-year-old Sophie scattered like confetti. I loved that house. I loved the way the afternoon light spilled across the hardwood floors. I loved the way Sophie's laughter filled every corner. I even loved, once upon a time, the man who stood in that kitchen and called me a babysitter. His name was Mark. On paper, he looked perfect. MBA, steady job at a financial firm, clean cut, polite enough at family gatherings. But paper lies. Behind closed doors, perfection peeled away. He was sharp, cold, dismissive. Not violent, no, just cruel, in a way that left no bruises, only invisible cracks in my chest. At first, it was little comments. "Why can't you lose the baby weight?" "You're home all day? What do you even do?" "Don't bother with the budget. I'll handle the money." I told myself it was stress. I told myself every marriage had its rough patches. But the cracks grew, and his words cut deeper. One night, around 11 p.m., I was folding laundry in our bedroom. Mark walked in, loosened his tie, and dropped onto the bed. His phone lit up with a text, and I couldn't help but glance. "See you Friday night, same place." A woman's name popped up, not a coworker I recognized. I froze, clutching one of Sophie's tiny pink socks. My chest tightened, but I said nothing. I just kept folding. Because I wasn't ready. Not yet. The next morning, he acted like nothing had happened. He kissed Sophie on the forehead, grabbed his coffee, and left for work. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the back door after it shut, my mind spinning. That was when his mother, Margaret, called. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice gentle, "could you come by this afternoon? There's something I'd like to discuss with you. Just you, not Mark." I hesitated. His mother and I had always had a strange relationship. She was polite, but distant, supportive in words, but never in action. So why now? "Of course," I told her. I didn't know it then, but that invitation would change everything. When I arrived at her house later that day, she greeted me with an unexpected warmth. The kind of warmth I hadn't felt in years. She led me to the sunroom, where light poured in through the glass walls, illuminating stacks of legal documents on the wicker table. She pushed a folder toward me. "This is between us," she said firmly. "Mark doesn't know, and I don't want him to, at least not yet." My pulse quickened. I opened the folder and stared. Inside were trust account papers, statements, balances. My eyes darted across the numbers, and I nearly gasped. $4 million. I blinked. Surely I was misreading. But no, line after line confirmed it. $4 million in a trust account, left by her late husband, Mark's father. And my name was on it. Not Mark's. Not even Margaret's. Mine. I stared at the documents, my mouth suddenly dry. This can't be right," I whispered, looking up at Margaret. Her eyes, sharp and unblinking, fixed on me. "It's right. My husband set this up before he passed. He didn't trust Mark with money. He knew what kind of man his son was becoming, but he trusted you." I swallowed hard, my hands trembling over the crisp papers. "But why me? I'm not his child." "No," she said, her lips tightening. "But you're the only one in this family who shows responsibility. You're the only one I've ever seen put Sophie first, put the home first. Mark treats money like a game. This isn't a game. This is Sophie's future. The room spun for a second. I thought of all the nights I'd stayed up, budgeting groceries down to the cent. The times I'd worked overtime just to cover Sophie's daycare, while Mark spent freely on golf outings, designer suits, and client dinners. Now, sitting in my lap was the proof that his family had seen through him all along. Still, I hesitated. If he finds out... He won't, Margaret cut me off. Not if you're careful. And even if he does. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping low. You have more power than you think. Don't forget that. Her words echoed in my mind the whole drive home. That night, I couldn't sleep. Mark snored beside me, oblivious. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan, the documents hidden in my purse in the closet. $4 million. My name. My responsibility. And yet, across the room, his phone lit up again. Another text. Another woman. My chest ached, but I didn't move. Not yet. Over the next weeks, the cracks in our marriage deepened. Mark's contempt grew bolder. You should be grateful I even keep you around. He spat one evening after Sophie had gone to bed. I froze, dinner plate in my hands. Excuse me? He smirked, swirling the whiskey in his glass. What do you bring to this marriage, really? I pay the mortgage, I drive the nicer car. You, what? Babysit Sophie? Fold laundry? Congratulations, you're replaceable. The words burned. My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped the plate. But then I remembered Margaret's sunroom. The folder. The balance. Replaceable? He had no idea. The following Friday, I decided to test something. He told me he had a work dinner. But instead of sitting at home, I arranged for Sophie to stay with my sister, and I drove downtown. I parked near the Marriott and waited. Sure enough, just after 7, I saw him. Not with colleagues. With her. A tall brunette in a red dress, her hand on his arm as they walked into the restaurant laughing. My stomach twisted. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. But I didn't march inside. I didn't scream. Instead, I lifted my phone, snapped a photo, and sat back in the car. I had proof now. Proof of what he was. And I was starting to realize I didn't need to cry. I didn't need to beg. I needed to plan. The next morning, he came home smelling faintly of perfume and arrogance. He kissed Sophie on the cheek like nothing had happened. Good night at work? I asked casually as I poured coffee. Yeah, he said, grinning. Big client, might mean a bonus. I smiled back. That's great, honey. But inside, I felt something shift. For years, I'd been surviving, folding socks, stretching paychecks, ignoring insults. But now I held 2 weapons, Margaret's trust account and his infidelity. And I wasn't going to waste either. That weekend, Margaret invited me again. This time, she slid across not just bank statements, but legal contacts. Her late husband's lawyer, a man named David Whitmore. I want you to meet with him, she said. If Mark continues down this path, you'll need legal protection. David will walk you through it. I met David on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. His office smelled of leather and old books, with shelves lined with law volumes and family photos. He shook my hand warmly. Margaret has told me a bit, he said. You're in a unique position. This trust is ironclad. It cannot be touched by your husband, not without your consent. And even if he tries, the law will stand by you. But, his eyes narrowed, you have to be strategic. Men like Mark don't just walk away. They fight. They manipulate. You'll need patience. I nodded, my heart thudding. I can be patient. David leaned back, steepling his fingers. Good, because revenge isn't about anger. It's about timing. From that day forward, I played my part. I smiled when he belittled me. I nodded when he bragged. I kissed him on the cheek when he left for his so-called dinners. But behind the scenes, I gathered everything. Bank records, text messages, photos. Piece by piece, I built a case. Piece by piece, I built my freedom. And through it all, Margaret stood by me, quietly, patiently. You're stronger than he realizes, she told me one night over tea. And soon, he'll see. But the night it all came to a head, the night my revenge finally unfolded, wasn't planned. It happened on a cold December evening, right before Christmas. We were sitting at the dinner table, Sophie coloring beside us. Mark poured himself another glass of wine, his tie loose, his eyes glazed. Out of nowhere, he sneered, "You know, sometimes I think I married you just for convenience. You were available, easy, and now you're nothing but a babysitter." The words sliced deep. My vision blurred. But then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed. A message from David. "Everything is ready. We will move tomorrow." I looked up at Mark, my lips curving into the smallest smile. Because he had no idea. I set my fork down, wiped my mouth slowly with the napkin, and looked at him across the table. "You think I'm just a babysitter?" I asked quietly. He smirked. "That's generous, honestly." Sophie lifted her head, sensing something in my tone, her little crayon pausing mid-scribble. I forced a smile at her. "Go play in the living room, sweetheart. Mommy and Daddy need to talk." She scurried off, dragging her coloring book with her, and then I turned back to him. "Well, you're about to find out just how wrong you are." He chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "Oh, really? What are you gonna do? Call my mother and complain?" I laughed softly, and even to my own ears it sounded foreign, cold. "No, Mark, I won't complain. Tomorrow morning you'll find out exactly what I'm going to do." The next day began like any other. Mark left the house around 8 a.m., whistling as he buttoned his coat. He was smug, humming with self-importance, probably already planning his next dinner with her. But while he thought he was heading to work, I was already downtown, seated across from David Whitmore at his polished oak table. The manila folder in front of me was thick. Phone records, bank statements, photos of Mark with the brunette at hotels and restaurants. "Are you ready for this?" David asked. I nodded, though my stomach twisted. "Yes." "Good, because we've filed this morning. By tonight, Mark will be served with divorce papers. And thanks to the trust account being solely in your name, his leverage is non-existent. In fact, his infidelity strengthens your case." My pulse quickened. Divorce papers. It felt surreal. But there was more. David slid another document across to me. "This is a motion for temporary custody of Sophie. Based on his behavior, his financial recklessness, and the evidence of infidelity, the judge will likely grant it. You'll have the home, you'll have stability. He'll have, well, not much." My breath caught. I looked down at the papers, the ink so fresh it was still faintly warm. "Are you sure?" I whispered. David smiled gently. "You're stronger than you think. Let's show him." That evening, Mark came home late. Too late, his tie askew, his hair mussed, his shirt half untucked. I waited in the kitchen, a calmness in me I hadn't felt in years. Sophie was asleep upstairs. He dropped his keys on the counter and grabbed a beer. "What's for dinner?" Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. Mark frowned, annoyed. He stomped to the door, yanked it open, and there stood a man in a crisp suit, holding a folder. "Mark Reynolds, you've been served." The smirk slid right off his face. His eyes darted from the papers to me, then back again. "What the hell is this?" he snapped. I rose from my chair, my voice steady. "It's called reality, Mark. Welcome to it." The days that followed were a whirlwind. He raged. He pleaded. He threatened. "You won't get away with this," he shouted one night, pacing the living room. "I already have," I told him calmly. "You think I didn't know? About her? About the money you've been draining from our joint account while I paid the bills? I know everything, and so does the court." He froze, eyes narrowing. "What court?" "The one that gave me temporary custody of Sophie yesterday," I said. "The one that recognized the trust account your father left in my name. The one that sees you for what you really are." His jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. "You can't." "I already did." The hearing came 2 weeks later. The courtroom was small but packed with tension. Mark sat at one table, his lawyer whispering furiously into his ear. I sat at the other, David steady at my side. Margaret was behind me, her hand resting on my shoulder. The judge flipped through the documents. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said at last, looking up at me, "it seems you've provided substantial evidence of both financial misconduct and infidelity. Additionally, the trust account, which I see here, is indisputably in your name. Do you wish to retain full management of it?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said firmly, my voice echoing in the silent room. "And regarding custody of your daughter?" I glanced briefly at Mark. His face was pale, sweaty. I turned back to the judge. "I wish for full custody, For Sophie's stability, for her safety. The gavel came down like thunder. Granted. Mark exploded outside the courtroom. You conniving. I cut him off. Don't. You had your chance. You sneered. You lied. You cheated. You thought I was just a babysitter. But now? Now I'm the one with the house, the account, and Sophie. You have nothing. For the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. And God help me, it felt good. That night, I tucked Sophie into bed. She wrapped her little arms around my neck. Mommy? Daddy's not coming back, is he? I smoothed her hair gently. No, sweetheart, but that's okay, because Mommy's here, and I'll always be here. As I kissed her forehead, my phone buzzed. A message from Margaret. You did well today, he'll never recover, but you will, and so will Sophie. I smiled through tears. Because for the first time in years, I believed it. But here's the thing. Revenge isn't just about winning in court. It's about living free afterward. And as I stood in that quiet house, listening to Sophie's breathing through the baby monitor, I realized something else. He had underestimated me. He sneered. He had treated me like nothing. And now, every time he looks at his empty bank account, every time he sits alone in that one-bedroom apartment he can barely afford, he'll remember the words he once threw at me. You're just a babysitter. No, Mark, I was never just that. I was the one who beat you at your own game. The weeks after the court ruling were strange. Quiet, but sharp with echoes of everything that had happened. Word spread fast in our community. It always does. In neighborhoods like ours, gossip moves quicker than the wind. Suddenly, the same people who used to smile politely at Mark and me in the grocery store were whispering when they saw him alone. I'd run into neighbors who'd lower their voices. I can't believe what he did to you, and after everything you sacrificed, you deserved better. For once, I wasn't embarrassed. I wasn't shrinking under pity. I stood straighter. Because they were right. One evening, about a month after the papers were served, I was picking Sophie up from daycare when I saw her. The brunette. The mistress. She was standing by a sleek black car, scrolling on her phone, when she looked up and noticed me. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. You must be her, she said flatly. I raised an eyebrow. Her? Mark's wife, she smirked, though it looked forced. Or ex-wife, I guess. I studied her for a moment. She was younger than me, maybe late 20s. Sharp cheekbones, expensive heels. But there was something brittle in her expression, like a woman who'd already realized her glittering prize was fool's gold. Ex-wife, yes, I said calmly. And mother of his child, and the one who left with everything he thought was his. Her smirk faltered. I leaned closer, lowering my voice. You can have him, but let me warn you, he'll treat you the same way he treated me, and when he does, don't say no one warned you. I walked away before she could answer. Sophie's small hand slipped into mine, her little voice chirping about her day, and behind us, I felt the mistress's stare burning into my back. Margaret called me that night. I heard you saw her, she said. Word gets around, I replied with a tired laugh. She'll learn. They always do. But you did something most women in this family never could. You didn't just endure, you fought back. And you won. Her words sank deep. I realized then that Margaret had never truly liked me because she was testing me. Watching, waiting to see if I had strength. And now? She respected me. Meanwhile, Mark's downfall was unfolding in real time. His firm demoted him after whispers of his behavior reached the partners. Rumors swirled about his drinking, his affairs, his financial recklessness. Clients didn't want to be associated with a man whose name was attached to scandal. The sleek car was gone. The suits disappeared. He moved into a dingy one-bedroom near the interstate. I only knew because a mutual acquaintance let it slip. He looks broken, they told me. Good. But the real breaking point came when Sophie had her preschool recital. She was so excited, practicing her little song at home for weeks. When the night came, she stood on that stage in her tiny blue dress, her voice trembling but sweet. I sat in the front row, Margaret beside me, tears in her eyes. And then, in the back of the auditorium, I saw him. Mark. He stood alone, shoulders hunched, watching Sophie sing. For a flicker of a moment, our eyes met. His face was pale, hollowed out, his once cocky smirk replaced with something I'd never seen before. Regret. But I didn't wave. I didn't smile. When Sophie finished and the applause roared, she ran straight into my arms, and as I hugged her, I knew Mark was watching. Watching her choose me. Watching her light shine without him. That was the moment I realized the truest revenge wasn't just legal or financial. It was living, thriving, and letting him witness every second of it from the sidelines. Later that night, as I tucked Sophie into bed, she whispered, "Mommy, did Daddy see me sing?" "Yes, sweetheart," I said softly. "He did." "Do you think he was proud?" My throat tightened. I stroked her hair. "Maybe, but what matters is that I'm proud. And I always will be." She smiled sleepily. "That's enough." And for the first time in years, I slept peacefully. But it didn't end there. The more I rebuilt, the more Mark crumbled. He tried to fight back at first, appealing the custody ruling, begging for financial concessions. But every attempt fell flat. The evidence was stacked too high, the judge too firm, the truth too obvious. And with each loss, he grew smaller. Meanwhile, Margaret and I grew closer. She became almost like a second mother to me. One evening over dinner, she clasped my hand across the table. "You know, when my husband set up that trust, he wasn't just protecting money. He was protecting Sophie's future. And now I see why. You're the kind of woman who will guard it, not squander it. You're the kind of mother who makes sure her daughter has everything she needs. He chose right, and so did I." Her words filled the cracks in me that Mark had carved years before. For once, I didn't feel like just a wife, or just a mother, or, as he sneered, just a babysitter. I felt like a woman who had fought through hell and come out whole. A few weeks after Sophie's recital, Margaret invited the entire extended family over for Sunday dinner. It was her idea, not mine, and I'll admit I hesitated. Mark hadn't been to a family dinner since the court ruling, but word was he might show up this time. "Why invite him?" I asked her over the phone. "Because," Margaret said firmly, "this family needs to see who he really is now, and they need to see who you are." Her voice carried the kind of steel that made me nod, even though she couldn't see me. That Sunday, I arrived with Sophie in a pale blue dress, my hair brushed neatly, the trust account papers still safe at home in my desk. The dining room smelled of rosemary chicken and garlic bread. Cousins, aunts, and uncles buzzed with chatter. But when I stepped inside, the room shifted. Conversations quieted. Eyes turned toward me, not with pity, but with something else. Respect. Margaret stood and kissed my cheek warmly. "You look radiant," she said, loud enough for the room to hear. Across the table, I saw him. Mark. He looked thinner, his once tailored clothes now hanging loose. His hair was unkempt, and the spark of arrogance that had once lit his face was gone. He stared at me with a strange mix of bitterness and longing. Dinner began, but tension hung heavy. Every clink of silverware felt sharp. At one point, his cousin, a blunt man named Henry, cleared his throat. "So, Mark," Henry said, "what happened to the fancy car? Thought you'd be rolling up in a Mercedes again by now." Mark's jaw tightened. He stabbed at his chicken. "Sold it. Market's bad." The room went quiet. Then Henry smirked. "Market's bad, huh? Or maybe karma's good." A few people chuckled. Mark's face flushed deep red. I stayed quiet, sipping my water, but Margaret placed a hand on my shoulder under the table. She didn't need to say it. We both knew. His power was slipping, even here, among his own blood. Later, while the others chatted in the living room, I stepped outside for air. The autumn wind was cool, carrying the smell of leaves. That's when I heard footsteps. He followed me out. "You think you've won?" he said bitterly. I turned, meeting his eyes. "I don't think anything, Mark. I know." His fists clenched at his sides. "She left me, you know. The woman you caught me with. She said I was too much trouble. That's what she told me, after everything I gave her." I tilted my head. "Everything you gave her? Or everything you stole from Sophie and me to give to her?" He looked away, shame flickering across his face. But then his voice hardened. You'll never erase me. I'm still her father. Yes, I said softly, but I'm the parent she looks for when she's scared. I'm the one she runs to when she's proud. And when she grows up, she'll know who fought for her and who betrayed her. For a moment, the wind was the only sound between us. His face crumpled, not with anger this time, but something closer to defeat. Then he turned and walked away. 2 days later, I received an unexpected visitor. It was the mistress, the brunette. She showed up at my doorstep, her eyes puffy, makeup smeared as if she hadn't slept. "Can we talk?" she asked. Against my better judgment, I let her in. She perched on the edge of the sofa, twisting her hands. "I thought he was different," she whispered. I thought he loved me." I almost laughed. He doesn't know how to love anyone, not really. She looked up at me, tears spilling. He told me you were controlling, that you didn't care about him, that you were just—" She stopped, biting her lip. "A babysitter?" I finished for her. Her eyes widened. "Yes, that's the word he used. Said you were boring. Said you had no ambition." For a long moment I stared at her. Then I leaned forward, my voice low and steady. "That's what he does. He tears down the people who hold him up. He takes and he drains, and when there's nothing left, he blames them. He'll never change." Her lip trembled. I believe you now." She left soon after, her heels clicking hollowly down the driveway. I never saw her again. That night, Margaret called me once more. "Do you realize what you've done?" she asked. "What do you mean?" "You've shown him for what he is, to his mistress, to his family, to this whole community. And you didn't have to scream or fight dirty or lower yourself. You just lived. You protected Sophie. And in the end, that's what crushed him." Her words sat with me long after the call ended. Because she was right. The real revenge wasn't the money. It wasn't even the court victory. It was the silence that followed. The absence of his power. The way his name became a shadow whispered in pity, not pride. And the way Sophie thrived through it all. Every time she laughed, every time she slept soundly, every time she asked for me instead of him, those were victories. Quiet, steady, unshakable victories. He would have to live with the knowledge that the woman he called just a babysitter built a life stronger than anything he could ever tear down. It didn't happen all at once, but little by little, Mark lost everything. First, the job. I heard from a former colleague of his that the partners had finally grown tired of his antics. The missed meetings, the complaints from clients, the whispers of inappropriate behavior. He wasn't fired outright, but the message was clear: resign quietly or be dragged out publicly. He chose resignation. Then came the finances. With no income and mounting debt, he sold off what little he had left. The fancy watches disappeared one by one from his wrist. His prized golf clubs popped up on Facebook Marketplace. Eventually, he stopped showing his face around town altogether. But the worst, I think, was the family. Margaret had tried, in her own way, to hold a door open for him. She didn't gloat, didn't rub salt in the wound. But after one too many late-night calls from him begging for money she refused to give, she finally cut him off. At the next family gathering, his absence wasn't even mentioned. No one asked where he was. No one seemed to miss him. He had made himself irrelevant. Months passed. Seasons shifted. And our lives, mine and Sophie's, blossomed. The trust account, wisely managed, gave us security I'd never dreamed of. I enrolled Sophie in a better school. We started dance classes, weekend trips to the science museum, afternoons baking cookies together. For the first time, I wasn't stretching every dollar, praying the car wouldn't break down. But it wasn't just money. It was peace. I woke up each morning without that knot in my chest. I walked through the house and felt joy again, not tension. Sophie's laughter filled the rooms without being drowned out by slammed doors and cruel remarks. One quiet Saturday, Margaret came over for tea. We sat at the kitchen table, sunlight spilling through the window, watching Sophie twirl in the living room in her tutu. "You know," Margaret said softly, "my husband used to tell me something. He said real strength doesn't roar. It whispers, it endures, and when the time comes, it rises." She reached across the table, covering my hand with hers. "That's what you've done. You rose, and you've shown this whole family what real strength looks like." Her eyes glistened with tears, and mine weren't far behind. The last time I saw Mark was almost a year later. It was in the parking lot of a grocery store. I was loading bags into the trunk when I heard someone call my name. I turned, and there he was. Thinner than ever, his clothes worn, his eyes hollow. He looked like a man who had been emptied out. We stood there for a moment, the past between us heavy as stone. "You won," he said quietly. I shook my head. "No, Mark, you lost. All by yourself." He flinched, and for a moment I thought he might argue. But he didn't. He just turned and walked away, shoulders slumped, swallowed by the crowd. I never saw him again. That night, as I tucked Sophie into bed, she asked, "Mommy, why are you smiling?" I brushed a strand of hair from her face and kissed her forehead. "Because, sweetheart, we're free, and we're going to be just fine." She smiled, her eyes drifting closed. "I like our life." Tears welled in my eyes as I whispered, "So do I." And that's the truth. My husband once sneered at me, called me just a babysitter, as though I were nothing. But what he didn't understand was that caring for our daughter, holding this family together, being the quiet strength behind the chaos, that was never nothing. It was everything. And when the time came, it was that strength that gave me the power to rise, to take back my life, to give Sophie the future she deserves. Mark thought he could break me with words, but all he really did was remind me who I was. And now, every time I hear Sophie laugh, every time I feel peace in my own home, every time I look at the trust account that secures her future, I remember he lost and I won. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched you, if it made you feel something, don't forget to subscribe, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and stay with me for more. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't loud, it's living well.